Well, hello, everybody. As you know, I'm Doug Bradburn. I'm the president and CEO of George Washington's Mount Vernon, and welcome members. This is a members-only live stream coming from my office right here at beautiful Mount Vernon. It is a gorgeous day today in Virginia. I know many of you are here, but it's sunny outside. It's a little windy outside, and the estate looks fantastic. And of course, the sad news is that right now, in a day like this, in early May, we might be sharing the estate with thousands of guests and school kids from all over the country, and of course, our beloved members. And first of all, I want to just say thank you all so much for being members of Mount Vernon, being part of this extraordinary mission. I know that it means a lot to many, many of you, and it means a lot to me that you are part of this with us. This is a challenging time. It's really unprecedented. And I know that when you join Mount Vernon as members, you do it for the love of the mission, for our desire to preserve this incredible place and teach about George Washington's legacy, as we've been doing for 160 years now as the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. This was going to be our 160th year. We decided to make it a special one, and look what happened. This is really quite remarkable. And I know that you are eager to get back out here, and you might want to know when we're going to open. And I will talk about all those things this hour and more. It'll be a chance for me to take questions, so please write in your questions on our different channels there, and we'll get to them if we can. I want to talk a little bit first, a couple of things. So first, I want to talk about what it was like to close the estate, and then what we're doing now and what we've been doing. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we face as an institution in this remarkable time. And then I want to listen a little bit to some of the questions and thoughts you all might have for Mount Vernon. But I also have a secret sneak peek at some upcoming opportunities just for members. We know that you expect something from Mount Vernon, and we are going to do all we can to make sure that this is a valuable relationship for both of us in this moment of COVID. So speaking of COVID, if I went back to Mount Vernon in early March, really late February, the first conversations about COVID had started to begun. And we put together a task force across the staff to see how we would make sure that we could make Mount Vernon as safe as possible for our guests. Now, if you remember back in that early period, late February, early March, it was very early on. And what I was most concerned about was a staff member being exposed to the virus, or someone coming here and maybe, passing out or something like that. It was such early days. We didn't really know about the people who might have the virus and be shedding viral load while they had no symptoms. And so we were focused on cleanliness, cleaning the different spaces. We put hand sanitizer out when people first came in, and we looked at all of our different ways of operating here and our communication strategy. And we also did start talking about, well, if it really starts to get bad in our region, there may be a possibility where Mount Vernon will need to close. And if you remember back to that, our naive early days in March, I did think, well, there might be a possibility we might close, because you remember Italy had started shutting down, and museums were shutting down. Museums were shutting down in Rome and in northern Italy, and I had actually been in Rome with my family in November on a family vacation. And so I was picturing all those different spaces and how they're dealing with flow, and recognizing, I remember when the Louvre was shut down, I think its staff, I think they revolted in the French manner. There was a staff march, and they made them shut down. And so the team here, we were looking at this challenge. Well, maybe we're going to have to shut at some point as a public health measure, because we have thousands of people coming here, and we don't want to spread the virus, obviously. And it happened within days, really, after those initial conversations, that it was clearly much worse, that it was clearly something we needed to do. And so we made the decision to close on March 13th, actually March 12th. On March 13th, we had a whole day to sort of prepare and mobilize our own staff, or mobilize our communications with members and with others about this necessary closure. And we closed on March 14th for the first time since the American Civil War, in any real extended period of time. And people have asked me, well, how do you know that? Are you sure about that? I'm sure about it because we have an incredible archive here at Mount Vernon that's very well organized. And the Civil War period, there were times when there was no visitors. There was long stretches where the Ladies Association couldn't have any visitors because of some of the dangers. The river was shut down and other things like that. But it was essentially still open for business. And back then, of course, it really was just beginning as a tourist site. So it didn't have the same kind of challenges. Really, since that time, the Spanish flu people have mentioned is a possibility. Well, in fact, again, at that point, 1918, the Spanish flu hit this region very heavily in the fall, and there's no evidence that Mount Vernon closed. But what happened is the ferry boat that took people from the city and from Alexandria to Mount Vernon, which had an exclusive contract with Mount Vernon, it actually shut down during the Spanish flu epidemic. So there was very few people coming in that period. It was a period of low visitation, but the estate was still open. Similarly, through World War II, through the Great Depression, through so many other remarkable moments in our history. And so there we were on March 14th, needing to close the Mount Vernon. And at that time, we closed it until the end of the month. The governor had had just declared a state of emergency, or Fairfax County did. I don't remember. I was on a phone call with the mayor's office in D.C., Muriel Bowser, that evening, and all the institutions, all the nonprofits were calling in and talking about what was going on and what the guidance was coming out of the mayor of D.C. And that over that weekend, you'll remember Fairfax County made a decision first to stay open and then to close, one after the other. And so by that Sunday, we knew not only that we were going to remain closed, but that all the staff would also transition to remote work, except for a skeleton crew. And that first few days, we made the transition quite seamlessly because we had prepared well. They have a very strong IT department here. And within days, within hours, on Monday, we were all on WebEx, which is the platform that we've been using to communicate with folks. And so a lot of the team is scattered all over the region, working as hard as ever, working to raise money for Mount Vernon, working to design our educational programs, working to design a lot of these digital programs, which I'll mention in a moment as well. And then we, of course, have other staff who are more front-facing staff who couldn't work. And so there was a challenge, and there's a challenging period still where we have lots of staff who are underemployed during this long period of closure. Now, one of the things I'm most proud of in this period of closure is within, I think, 4 days, we were doing live streams right here from the mansion Mondays. I gave a live stream to talk about I think I just talked about the closure and about the history of Mount Vernon, history of the estate a little bit, and took questions. And we've had one every day of the week since then, and in some days, more than one. And that aspect of our mission is going strong. We are getting a lot of attention. We've been featured on C-SPAN. We've been featured in different news all over the country. We also, as you know, have got all these incredible resources for teachers and students. And think about all those teachers who had to transition to distance learning all of a sudden. I was a professor. I know these professors don't know how to do that. They don't plan to do that, at least. And some of them, maybe the ones under 35, have had some experience. But those old farts like myself, it's a tough transition. And so Mount Vernon was there putting out, a lot of our resources, lesson plans, interactive maps, interactive games, Be Washington Online, that classrooms can play all over the country. And those resources, which we've invested in part because of the great support we've gotten from members over the years, those resources have really been strong in serving our mission in this time of COVID. And as you know, we have a really great social media team. We've got Twitter and Facebook and all the YouTube channel going on there. So we appreciate you following those as well. But it is a difficult time. We are educators by nature, and we particularly love to educate people about this place. And there's no better way to visit Mount Vernon, than to be here in the flesh. And so it's a hard time for us to be closed. And let's be frank, economically, it's a disastrous time for us. We are an institution that is funded over 75% of our operations through attendance and attendance-related revenue. So that's tickets that we sell, that's food that we sell, and those are things we sell in the shops, our gifts that we sell in the shops. And we do tremendous business there. We've supported hundreds of employees through this incredible business model for years, many years, and always refining it, always running on a very tight ship. But nobody plans to have zero revenue for months on end. And that's really what we've been confronting in this environment as the closure went from March 14th to the end of the month, and now all the way through April. And here we are in May with an uncertain open date looming on us. It's a period where we would have had our most visitors of the year. We get between March 15th and June 15th, somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000 visitors through this period. And so that is a loss of revenue that we simply can't sustain. Now, for those of you who may ask, well, did you get any support from the CARES Act? The remarkable $2.2 trillion CARES Act that the federal government put out. Well, we don't qualify for the loans under that act because we're too large. So you have to be a small business to qualify for those, having under 500 people on your staff, and we had well over 600 last year, and so didn't qualify under the headcount rules. And sadly, there was very little else available in that act for us. There are some tax credits we can take, but in general, we're reliant upon our own fiscal management and our fundraising and the support of incredible members like you. So it has been an interesting time, but I can tell you, I am incredibly proud of the staff we have here. They made this transition with a tremendous amount of grace and class under very difficult situations. All of us are at home now, and people have their kids climbing all over them in some cases, or they're worried about their parents, or they're worried about their own health in this environment, and they're still expected to do the job and to work hard in a period of great uncertainty. And to be frank, I personally have found a tremendous amount of strength from the experience of American history. And of course, as you know, I'm a specialist on the founding of the United States, and I've come to love George Washington in particular in the years I've been here since Binghamton University when I came in 2013. And very early on, there was a letter that in looking through Washington's maxims, that I lit upon, that he wrote to William Heath, General William Heath, 1778, in one of the dark periods of the American Revolution, in which Washington says we must make the most of our, what did he say? Well, that was excellent. Great quote there. He says that we must make the most of our misadventures or our challenges. It is our duty to do that. And that has been something that has strengthened and inspired us here at Mount Vernon as we try to get through a time of great uncertainty and get through it together. So I want to take some questions. I do have one announcement, but why don't I take a question first, and I'll make a little announcement about some of the things that we're going to try to do for members only moving forward. Matt, what do you got?
Doug, we have a question that someone has bought a year membership before the closure. They haven't been able to use it. They're happy to support Mount Vernon, but was there any consideration on extending the membership expiration date?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for buying a membership and becoming part of the team here, part of the mission at Mount Vernon, which is as crucial as ever. Isn't this the time where we need to be teaching people about George Washington's example of leadership and character through crisis that helped establish this great nation? So thank you so much, first of all. And the question is about whether we're making any consideration to extend the period of membership because they haven't been able to come to the estate. Well, first off, we are happy to deal with these issues on a case-by-case basis. If you can at all afford it, we appreciate you supporting us in that way and playing out the year of membership as it was intended. But if you are having financial hardship or you have your own unique situation, please feel free to reach out directly to Mount Vernon. We'll connect you with Kara Hirschhorn, who is our head of membership, who's happy to pick up the phone and call you and talk it through and what makes sense for you. It's most important for me that you remain part of the family and part of the team here at Mount Vernon. So, if you're not able to continue to sustain at the level you were, or feel like you need a little bit of break on the back end, we're happy to work with you individually. But for the vast majority of folks out there who don't pay strict attention and always when their memberships are renewed. We're not going to do a blanket policy. We want to keep renewing and growing members every year. And I would say this is a crucial thing for us. I mean, our annual funding, a portion of it comes from an estimation of how many members we have, how many members will renew. And of course, we've been gradually trying to grow our membership because I think it's a tremendous value for families, for folks all over the country who believe in our mission here. And so at a time when we're closed, we aren't able to sell as many memberships as we normally were because people aren't coming here to the estate. We have, I'm happy to say, had a lot of renewals. I know a lot of you love this place for our mission first and foremost, and you see us as one of your charitable contributions annually. So thank you very much for that. But it's those new memberships that are difficult to get at a time like this, where people come to this place. They might even experience it for the first time in 5 years or 10 years if they're around here, or first time ever if they're from somewhere else, and realize how beautiful it is and how impactful it is and how much value they're getting here by coming back regularly with their family. And without us being open, it's difficult to have those sales. So for those of you who can, it'd be a wonderful time for you to purchase a membership for your kids or for your grandparents or for your friends or for your neighbors, and encourage them to help support us as well.
So Doug, a question from Paige. Are members, would they be allowed to use the parking lot and walk along the river?
Paige asked a question about use of the parking lots and walk along the river. If you mean the parking lots that are out on the parkway, people are welcome to park there and walk along the parkway. Those are maintained by the National Park Service in partnership with Mount Vernon. If you mean the parking lots behind the gates, I'm afraid not. We can't be open for members. In fact, we only allow right now essential staff to come to Mount Vernon based on the governor's order that non-essential businesses are closed, and that order has been extended now to May 14th. Now, we hope to have a time soon when we can announce that members can come through the gates and enjoy Mount Vernon. But until that time, I'm afraid we can't have anybody coming back behind the gates, as it would be in violation of the governor's order and our responsibility to try to keep the curve as flat as possible.
And Doug, Luis would like to know, are the talks at Mount Vernon recorded? And if so, could they be made available for members to watch at home? So
Luis asked a great question. Do we record our talks? And yes, we do. We record all our talks, and they're all available to watch at home on YouTube and on our Facebook channel as well. If you follow us on social, but if you go also to our YouTube channel at Mount Vernon, it's probably the easiest way. Now, we also know we have some work to do to help navigating some of those older programs and pushing them up there. We are not a media company, so we do have some challenges getting that navigation to be the best in the world, but it's all there on YouTube. And in fact, we're going to make more available for members going forward. In fact, content only available for members. So your membership really does have some rewards that's unique. And I'm delighted to announce that one of the first things we're going to do for members only, well, we're doing this live stream, which is it's scintillating, I know. But one of the things we're going to do next week at this time, I think it's on Monday at 4, but it's certainly next Monday, it'll be an interview with me and Joe Ellis, the great historian Joe Ellis, who wrote Founding Brothers, who wrote The American Sphinx, who wrote The Quartet, who wrote all those incredible award-winning books. Joe Ellis and I are going to talk about his writing career, but also talk about the founding and its continuous relevance for Americans. So this is going to be exclusive content for members only with Joe Ellis and I. And Joe is a big character. He's got a huge personality. He's going to jump right out of you at the screen. If any of you watched the History Channel documentary that the History Channel did on George Washington, you remember Joe Ellis, that crazy line, and he's got that mock turtleneck on, and he's like sitting back in his chair like this, and he says, George Washington married Martha Washington because she was a catch, and Martha Washington married George Washington because he was a stud. And that's Joe Ellis. He just puts it absolutely correctly apropos. So we're gonna get into his brain a little bit, and we're gonna wrestle with him and try to make him say some crazy stuff. But he is an interesting, great historian, and I know will be engaging for a lot of us to watch. Members only. So tell your non-member friends this is going to be once in a lifetime, because I'm going to bring it with Joe. I'm not just going to let him talk and talk, and I'm going to interrupt him and say, Joe, let's get down to the meat of the matter. I'm not going to let him get away with just rambling on. We're going to get to it, and we're going to take your questions as well. We're going to mediate that conversation. And I'm happy to say we're going to do that with a number of other people, including Rick Atkinson, 3-time Pulitzer Prize winning historian of the Great Liberation series, and he won one of his Pulitzers in journalism. And of course, he wrote this great new first volume in his next trilogy on the American Revolution called The British Are Coming. Another Pulitzer Prize winner and National Book Award winner, Nathaniel Philbrick, author of The Mayflower, author of a trilogy on the American Revolution. Nat is writing a new book called Journeys with George, or Following George, something like that, where he's traveling all over the country to everywhere George Washington went and writing about his adventures with himself, his wife, and his dog, which, by the way, one of those adventures included having lunch at my house here at Mount Vernon with his dog and my dog attacking each other. And so we'll talk about that. And then finally, I think I also have lined up Rick Brookhiser. Brookhiser has a great new book on called something about liberty. In the Name of Liberty. No, that's not right. Give Me Liberty. Yes, and it's about American ideals of liberty from going back to 1619, and then all the way. I think there's maybe something from Reagan in there in that book as well. But he looks at these great documents, great moments in American history, in which people have invoked and defined what it means to be an American through the ideals of liberty. So another incredibly timely, apropos study. And I'm also going to get at Brookhiser and make him squirm a little bit too. This is going to be a lot of fun for me. That's one of the reasons I said to do it. But I said, let's do that only for members, because these are really great historians. These conversations should be very appealing, and I look forward to being there with you all. And I will say, in addition to that, we're going to do lots of other great things weekly for members only. You're going to get to have tea with Martha. You're going to get to tour the gardens with the great Dean Norton here, or maybe frolic with some of the new lambs with Dean Norton. He's an American treasure. He's Mount Vernon's incredible Lorax, the man of the trees. He came with the place. I think he knew George Washington. Last year, he celebrated 50 years at Mount Vernon. So if you get him going, you're liable to get a potato gun shot off. Who knows what Dean Norton will pull out, again, for members only. So we got lots of content that we'll generate. And go ahead and send in suggestions of things you'd like to see. We'd love to do something fun. Now, here's something we're doing this week as well. That's for not just members, but for everybody. We're going to do a game night on Thursday night. I think we're going to try to do our first game night. And we're going to have 3 experts from Mount Vernon who are competing over their trivia knowledge of George Washington and all things George Washington in Mount Vernon. And then the audience, the viewing audience, are going to be able to play along and choose which experts they agree with. So it's going to be a fun, interactive game night for the whole family. I promise it'll be family friendly. And I'm not sure exactly what time that is on Thursday. 5 o'clock, Matt? 5 o'clock? Yeah, so good time to get the family around. Watch the Facebook, YouTube, the whole kit and caboodle, and play along with us. All right, another question.
Yeah, Doug, Roberto would like to know, if the Virginia stay-at-home order is lifted on June 10th, would it be possible to open the grounds to Mount Vernon, perhaps the education center, while keeping the house closed? People could still walk the gardens, visit the outbuildings, practice social distancing. Roberto
asked the million-dollar question, literally. When can we open this place up, and what will it look like when we do? Well, I'm happy to say we are going to be opening up sometime, and it's going to sound a lot like what Roberto laid out there. It will be. We're going to emphasize the outdoors, the extraordinary 400 acres we have here for people to explore, the Pioneer Farm, the animals, the tomb of George Washington, the old tomb, the gardens, the beautiful gardens in bloom right now. It's just gorgeous. The views from the Potomac. And then, of course, the museums can be managed. I mean, there'll be limits to how many people can be in particular spaces at a particular time. There'll be requirements of social distancing. We have to protect our staff. We got to protect our guests. We'll have lots of cleaning regimes in place. We'll have lots of hand sanitizer available. We'll probably have masks on for a little period there. We'll probably require some masks when you're indoors in indoor spaces. But yeah, we will open in a way that maximizes our public health and safety, but also allows people to experience this extraordinary place. So I think it is something to look forward to soon. The governor came out today mentioning that he thought that Virginia would be in phase one of the president's guidelines by May 15th. And under phase one, we might even be able to have a tiny aspect of Mount Vernon open. But to be frank, we're going to take our time and do it right and be open when we feel comfortable that we're doing it correctly for our staff safety and for our communication with our guests. But yeah, Roberto, I would guess, let's put the over-under sometime between May 15th and June 15th. One of those days will be the day that we shoot the potato gun off on the East Lawn and raise the flags and invite all our members to come see the place at a distance from each other and following all the rules. But yes, we're looking forward to that too.
Doug, question from Ann. George Washington lived through an epidemic. How do you think he would have handled this crisis?
George Washington lived through a lot of crises, not just epidemics of all kinds. He lived through yellow fever epidemics. He lived through smallpox epidemics. He lived through all kinds of challenges related to war and economic depression. And Washington would have dealt with it with his calm, patient humility and judgment. And this is something we haven't heard enough about in our culture, I think. I'm as bad as anybody. I want to get out there and get open, get going. I want to know what business is going to be like in the fall. I want to know when I can travel again. I want to know. Everybody wants to know. They want to get out there. But we're living in a time where we can't know everything. And we have to be patient with each other. And we have to be patient with ourselves, our coworkers, and all the institutions that we care about, our family. And really persevere in times of ambiguity. I think, in many ways, perseverance is an easy thing to say. And one of the great characteristics of George Washington in the American Revolutionary War is persevering through 8 long years of war, not knowing when this thing is ever going to end, but at the same time, always dealing with a crisis where his soldiers didn't have enough shoes. He didn't have enough food to spread around. He didn't know if he was able to, to get into a secure position so he didn't lose his armies. It was a life and death situation. It was the cause was all wrapped up in it. And the frustration and anger came out occasionally. But in general, it was that perseverance. And perseverance in times of ambiguity, it seems to me, is one of the key qualities that we all should try to emulate in this moment itself. Being aware that we can't always know everything. And I would also encourage this whole nation to get away from the finger pointing and the blame game. I was watching the governor's announcements earlier today when he was talking about Virginia. I was only able to catch about 10 minutes of it. I was watching it on Periscope on the Twitter app, and I'm watching it along with the Twitter feed that's going up there. And what the Twitter feed is just an appalling a series of people attacking each other, attacking the president, attacking the governor, attacking everybody for being stupid or being dumb or saying the wrong thing. And it's gotcha this and gotcha that. And it's incredibly toxic and destructive because there were certainly things that the United States could have done better over the last couple months. And these are at all levels and in all different aspects of our society. The failures were legion, and they were at every level. And so don't be too eager to point fingers at other people. And let's really come together to think about how we can move forward and craft a better world as we get through this. That's going to be the great challenge of our time. And the historians and the journalists will fight over this period and point fingers, and they'll have some good points on each side. But ultimately, it doesn't help us right now. To spend too much energy worrying and fighting over these things. Let's come together and work through this in a way that makes sense. And this is what George Washington would have said. He said it in his farewell address. He said it in his first inaugural. He said it all the time. That nonpartisan was his thing, not bipartisan, nonpartisan. find out what we all have in common. What is the thing we're trying to solve? And let's work together to solve it, recognizing that not any one of us has all the answers. And that was the thing I think I learned most from him. And our whole system is based on massive compromises that have only been the only reason why we've survived as a nation for over 200 years is because we've been willing to compromise and willing to recognize that we're not perfect and that we need to work together. So that's the message of George Washington, particularly at times like this.
Doug, a question from Joni. Did George Washington ever just let loose and be a goofball with his friends and family, or did a Virginia gentleman not do those things?
Did George Washington ever let loose and be a goofball? Well, it's interesting you say that. I have the rules of civility right here. And nowhere in here is there a rule that says, when in company of your discreet friends, let loose and be goofballish. Now, it's always about keeping yourself under control, keeping yourself balanced, not allowing yourself to laugh too much, not allowing yourself to speak too loud. Now, in reality, Washington did those things. In fact, there are some anecdotes of him with friends, with a glass of champagne, talking and laughing to great delight. Many times, however, he's surrounded by people he doesn't know. And there's also a lot of stories about him sitting quietly and barely engaging with other people. So he's a clearly kind of shy, diffident figure in company. But there is a great letter he writes to one of his friends, his best friend, the Marquis de Châteauroux, Francois Jean, in which he wrote that there's nothing like the hilarity that's bred by a good glass of claret. Really invoking the idea of people sitting around drinking claret and the hilarity that ensues. I mean, that speaks to the joy of being around friends, the freedom of involving yourself in that way. And I think Washington, amongst his closest friends, his most intimate friends, could let loose a little bit. But it was hard for him because he was so often in command and he was so often in demand. And when you're in a position of authority over other people and when, they have to rely upon you, you can't always just sort of let your hair go down and be goofy, even as much as we all might like to.
Great. Doug, a question from Linda. When once the state of Virginia gives the approval for opening, how long will it take Mount Vernon to be ready for the general public and school groups?
Well, it's a good question. When we get the go clear to be open, how long will it take us to be ready? When we get the go clear to be open, we're going to be ready to be open. We've been planning. We're in the process of finalizing plans. We do want to take the time to communicate those plans and help train our staff who haven't been involved with them, and also help communicate with our members and friends. I don't yet know what it's going to look like on D-Day, on day one, when we open. Is it going to be just for members? Is it going to be for all comers? And your question about school groups is really interesting because obviously in the earliest phases of this opening, we're all going to be under strict guidelines around social distancing and masks and all those sorts of things. So it's not clear to me when school groups are going to want to be coming to Mount Vernon, or adult groups, which is actually more apropos this time of year, actually into June after the schools start closing. Now, we would have had a lot of schools already signed up to come to Mount Vernon. Those have all, canceled by now and are not on the books. But we still do have some school groups signed up to come in July, for instance. Will they end up coming? I don't know. When they come, what will their experience be like here? We don't know yet. But when we do know that we'll follow the guidelines from the CDC, from the local health authorities, from the governor's office, from Fairfax County, to make sure that however we do it, it's using best practices, social distancing, and providing an experience that can be impactful, but also staying within the rules that we're going to have to be guided by. So it's a great question, and it's been an interesting planning period here, and we'll see how it goes. It's going to be great.
Doug, a question from William. Are there plans in the works to restore Mount Vernon's basement to the way it appeared and functioned during George Washington's lifetime?
William asked a question about the cellar here at Mount Vernon. Let me say a couple things about that. The cellar is really quite extraordinary here. We, 21st century Americans, we're not that impressed by basements. They're pretty commonplace. In George Washington's time, full cellars, the full size of a house his size were very rare in the Tidewater and Chesapeake. Indeed, Washington's is probably one of the oldest extant full cellars that you can find anywhere. When I say full cellar, it is a full size cellar. You can stand up there, man can stand straight in that cellar, and it also covers all the square footage of the actual foundation of the house. Now, he built it over time. The house that he inherited from his brother's estate, from his brother's heirs, didn't have a cellar. So he actually dug that out himself as he expanded it. And he also had vaults underneath the piazza to help hold it up, but also as another place to store more items in there. So Washington used his space well. But of course, if you go down there now, and we have this great National Treasure Tour when we're open in normal times, where you can go down there and see where Nicolas Cage kidnapped the president of the United States at a secret spot down there. But what you also see is you see the debris of a century and a half of work that's been done in the cellar to maintain the house. Everything from old boilers that were put in the 19th century. There's an old well that was down there. There's all, the wires from the electric that's in the house. So there's all this stuff that isn't 18th century. So the question, will you restore it to make it look 18th century, that's a big question, because it's an incredibly expensive problem to try to figure out. Because we'd have to hide all that modern stuff that's necessary for the HVAC, for the lighting, for the security systems, for all the things that make it a tourable and maintainable mansion today, but then also restore the way it would have looked. And right now, if you go down there, there's all these brick piers. There's a sequence of brick piers all over the cellar, which were put in the late 19th century, in the 20th century, in the 1950s, all to help hold up and shore up the mansion itself. So all those would have to come out, and we'd have to put in some kind of other way to assure that mansion can hold 1 million people a year tromping through it. So it's a big question, it's a big challenge, but I'm happy to say we do hope to do it. We do have a campaign that we're working on that we haven't entirely announced yet, where we're raising funds to help us do work on the foundation of the mansion itself. And part of that project will be to reinterpret and interpret the cellar, in which case we will not only be able to show you the cellar as George Washington saw it, we'll also be able to recreate the place where two enslaved individuals lived in George Washington's time. Frank Lee, who was the butler, George Washington's trusted butler who had the keys to all the most expensive china, managed the household. He and his wife lived in the cellar with their own kitchen, and would have lived and worked in that space. And we'd love to be able to find a way to interpret that so people who visit could understand the full range of experience in the extraordinary mansion house. So great question about the cellar. But one other thing I'll say about the cellar, we, in the process of doing some of the research in preparation of doing more restoration work in the cellar, we exposed George Washington's original 18th century drain works. And you can go online and check out some of the images of that. It's really quite amazing to see the drain that Washington had put into that cellar when he was designing it. In fact, they still channel water. They don't channel it incredibly effectively because of some of these piers I talked about that were put in there, and they kind of block it up. And that would be one of the things we would want to make sure we did, was get the water flow correctly in that cellar space as we restore it. Matt.
So Doug, several people have been asking, but Mary's asked it really well. Are there any plans to open Mount Vernon to members only with social distancing?
Great question. Are there any plans to open Mount Vernon to members only? Now, this is a good question. And in fact, I'll tell you a little bit of the story going back to when we closed. We closed on March 14th. And at that time, we were trying to figure out, what could we do? What would we be able to do? And one idea that we kicked around was, well, maybe we could have it open as a place like a park that members could come, where we wouldn't have to have them, in any transactional way, but just kind of shape their entrance so they could enter somehow onto the estate and use the estate. But very quickly after that, things got much more clear, and it was clear we couldn't, not only could members not come, but we couldn't even have unessential staff here. So when we do get the green light to be able to be opened again, I do think there's a possibility that we'll do events only for members. In fact, I can't promise anything right now because the question was, do you have any plans? And we don't have any plans for members only. But I think it's something we need to take into serious consideration. And how about something like a members only evening, where we allow them to come after hours and walk around the grounds, maybe buy a picnic basket with a bottle of wine, set themselves up somewhere nice and have a drink and enjoy the beautiful views or something like that. That might be a direction that we head, because we certainly don't want to turn anyone away from Mount Vernon who, after all this, has made the trek here or is finally getting their family out here and then have to confront them with a members only placard. But maybe something like a beautiful evening. I wonder if you all would enjoy something like that. Matt, what do you think? Does that sound like a good idea?
Sounds like a good idea.
He likes it. Matt promises to be here filming members only evening.
So Doug, David has another history question. Did President Washington invite any Native American tribes to the president's house? And did he sign any peace treaties with Native American tribes?
Well, that's I'm turning my head around to look at my bookshelf here because I was trying to see where my copy of Colin Calloway's magisterial study of George Washington Indians is. I can't see it over my shoulder, and it's probably quite up there. It is on my desk. Covered in, so here is Colin Calloway's The Indian World of George Washington. I hope I'm framing this correctly. This is the winner of the George Washington Book Prize this year. This is the definitive study of George Washington and Native Americans. Everything you ever wanted to know about Washington dining with Native Americans can be found in between these covers. And you know what? And I'll just give you a little piece, but you'll see in the back here, there's a blurb by Douglas Bradburn, President and CEO of George Washington's Mount Vernon, which says, finally, one of the best historians of colonial Native America has taken up the challenge of putting one of the most important pieces of George Washington's life and experience back into the narrative. Calloway's monumental analysis helps us understand a half century of powerful and impactful Native American history more clearly.
And we're having him on May 12th at 7 p.m.
And we're going to have him on May 12th at 7 p.m. talking probably to Kevin Butterfield, maybe Jim Ambuske as part of our library talks. Is that a Michelle Smith lecture, or is that a normal lecture? At any rate, it's on May 7th. It's open to everybody. Give it a good whirl. But yes, he invited Native Americans. In fact, it's really one of the important aspects of his presidency. George Washington presided over one of the greatest military defeats in American history when he was president of the United States. I don't know if that surprises you, but it's true. It was an effort to subdue Native American tribes in the Ohio Valley, led by Arthur St. Clair, who was ambushed and his army was destroyed. 1,800 men, I think, something like that. The battle doesn't even have a name because Americans don't like to think about defeats like that. But what happened after that defeat, Washington himself was furious because it was a lot like Braddock's defeat, and he had warned Sinclair, not to fall into the same traps that Braddock had fallen into, to make sure that he covered his flanks, to make sure he wasn't overpowered. And of course, Sinclair did all the things he told him not to do. So what happens is that Native Americans are ascendant in the Ohio Valley, which is claimed by the United States. George Washington doesn't have an army at all. And so how does he keep all of Indian country, all these different tribes, from basically aligning together in a great confederacy and pushing back against the Americans' claims? And one of the ways he does it is through very depth diplomacy, where he brings Native American groups from all over the Southeast, from the Northwest, from the Iroquois to the Choctaw, to the Cherokee, to the Miami, and all these different Native American groups who come to Philadelphia and dine with him. And he'll do Native American diplomacy. He'll share wampum belts. He'll smoke the peace pipe. He'll pass the peace pipe around the presidential mansion table with Native Americans and make promises and talk about what they're worried about and talk about what they need and keep them out of war, which gave the United States time to build up another army, the Legion of the United States, led by Mad Anthony Wayne, General Wayne, who marched and won against the Native Americans at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, which really defeated the power of Native Americans in the Ohio Valley for a generation to come. And so Washington, yes, had many, many dinners with Native Americans. And really, he had a life filled with Native American experiences, from his first viewing of them when he was 16 years old on his trip out in the Shenandoah Valley, when he described a war party of Native Americans dancing, to, of course, his final years as president and all the years in between, the French and Indian War, the American Revolution, both in war and in peace, diplomacy, in anger, as allies and as enemies. So Washington's experience with Native Americans runs the gamut.
So Doug, Fred has asked a very interesting question. At some point, Walt Disney judged that Disneyland was just too far from the U.S. population and created Disney World. Have we ever considered doing a similar type of move where we maybe created something in Middle America to allow best guests that can't come?
Well, that's a good question. Have we ever thought about moving Mount Vernon or building a replica? We'd love to have a replica. We can get more people in. Interestingly, you can go on our webpage and look for all the replicas of Mount Vernon. They're all over the world. It's a wonderful little project that a woman named Dr. Brad did, who's at South Carolina, University of South Carolina. Did a project with our media team here on where's Mount Vernon, like all over the country. With the database you can search, and in fact you can help build it, because you know that, like that bank out on Route 1 at the Wells Fargo that looks like Mount Vernon. These things are all over the place. These Sears Roebuck houses that were Mount Vernons that were done in the 20s, and then there's World's Fair Mount Vernons. There's a lot of funeral homes, famous funeral homes. So Mount Vernon is actually out there in the world. But now we've always been a place where, it isn't just the house and the mansion, it's the tomb of George Washington that makes it such a special place, right? So he's buried here. And so if we ever tried to recreate Mount Vernon on the banks of the Mississippi River, we wouldn't have George Washington and Martha Washington here in the same way. And it wouldn't be the same kind of hallowed ground. But that doesn't mean that Mount Vernon's message doesn't matter to people all over the country. And we do try to bring that to them, both through our digital means, but also our partnerships with teachers. We've been teaching teachers from all over the country since 1999 who come to Mount Vernon, and they go back into their local communities and they spread the word, and they join a network of other, I like to think of them as missionaries for the cause, really missionaries for the mission here at Mount Vernon, spreading the word and ways to teach about the founding era. Matt.
So Doug, a question from Bob. Can you tell us about some of the upcoming book lectures? You did talk about several of these that are members only, but there are other library ones too, right?
Yeah, there's a number coming up every week. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think there's Sarah Giorgini has a great book on the Addams religion in the Addams family, and not the Addams family from like the Munsters or the Addams family, but the John Quincy Adams. I think it's called The Household of Gods, something like that. Sarah Giorgini works in the Massachusetts Historical Society, brilliant scholar. That's a wonderful book coming up. Lindsay Chervinsky is going to be doing a book project at some point. Maybe that's not even until June. There's a great new book on the cabinet. We mentioned Colin Calloway. We've mentioned Matt has a list for me to repeat. So
May 5th, we got Sarah Giorgini.
May 5th, Sarah Giorgini. See, I was right about that. Thank you very much.
May 12th is Colin Calloway.
May 5th, Colin Calloway. 1 week after, yes.
May 22nd is T.H. Breen.
May 22nd, T.H. Breen, the Breener. Extraordinary scholar, taught for most of his career at Northwestern University, has written very many impactful books on the American Revolution. His most recent George Washington title was on George Washington's tours, the presidential tours. And I think he called it on Common Ground. And then there's another, and then the book I think he's presenting on this time is a more general history of the American Revolution.
And then on June 16th, we have Lindsay Chervinsky as well.
Yeah, June 16th is Lindsay. And then in addition to all those, remember, if you came in late, we're going to have special member events with Joe Ellis, with Nathaniel Philbrick, with Rick Atkinson, and Rick Brookhiser. You're talking about some of the best historians in the country today, all exclusive for members of Mount Vernon. So you've got a master's degree worth of book talks and lectures coming up in the next 2 months, and especially if you're a member of Mount Vernon. And so that is something that we can do for you to bring these incredible stories of our founding together and sharing them as we all are. There's always something to learn. I always learn something from every one of these conversations. I really enjoyed the format of the split screen, Matt. I think that I'm interested to see how it goes with me and Joe. It does seem sometimes with these folks, it's hard to get a word in edgewise. That's why I don't appear with anybody. So it's just me. And that's how we do it. Matt, any other questions?
Yeah, Doug, a question from Scarlett. Are there any volunteer opportunities, virtual or otherwise, that members can partake as well?
Yeah, so volunteer opportunities at Mount Vernon. That's a really good question, Scarlett. We obviously, when we're open, we have great volunteer opportunities. We have over 350 volunteers on our annual list at any given time. And a lot of those folks are helping out in our basic guest services, or is something as arcane as the library. They work in the library itself, helping with some of the organization in there. So there's a lot of different opportunities that you can pursue to share your talent with Mount Vernon. I think as a gift, what more a gift could somebody give than their special skill set and their time? Talk about something that we all. Seems like now we have a lot of time, but usually we rarely have, and is one of the most valuable things because you can't make more time. And to give it to the mission here is a really special thing, and we do love our volunteers. Now that the volunteer, sadly, I haven't seen the volunteers, since we've been closed because we got to protect their health, we got to keep them away, But I don't know if there's any virtual volunteering going on quite yet. Allison Wickens, who's our incredible Vice President of Education here, has been spearheading a number of projects that are making things available for staff who don't have any work they can do now, including a transcription project that we're doing in the library that's only, I'm afraid, available to staff. If this shutdown lasts a lot longer, we probably do need to figure out a way to engage our volunteers as well, and we'll keep that in mind, Scarlett. Thank you so much for a great question.
So Doug, I think that's all the questions we have right now.
Well, that's all the questions we have right now. So I encourage you to, continue to check out our webpage and spread the word about it. Spread it to kids and grandparents and family members who are shut in and trapped all over the world, because it's remarkable stories about George Washington that we want to learn. And I also want to express again my heartfelt thanks for you for being members, for joining me here this afternoon to share a little bit about what's been going on at Mount Vernon. We'll certainly do this again sometime when there's news to share. And I do hope to see you all next week when I give Joe Ellis the third degree and start thinking of your questions now. But thanks again. I can't wait till that day where I'm going to stand out front waving my hat and everybody can start their engines and run into Mount Vernon safely at a distance from each other and have an incredible educational experience at one of the most special places in the world. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt. Thanks to the team. Remember, if you have any queries or concerns, send them in to us. We can manage them. We'll work with you. We want you to stay members, and we want you to stay strong. Hold fast out there, everybody. We'll be open soon.